Hello and welcome to Easter Eggs right here on Hyper RPG. I'm your host as always, Scott Shuken. Today, our topic of discussion is indie devs and co-working spaces. I have with me two developers from Indies Workshop. Next to me is Patrick Morgan, who has worked on the recently released Gurgamoth and the Rust Belt and is currently working on a secret unannounced title. And across from here is Jenn Sandercock, who is currently working on Thimbleweed Park, working on some edible games, which is what it sounds like. We're going to get to that. And worked on other projects such as L.A. Noire and lots of other stuff in your past. Welcome, you guys. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
So first I want to ask about Indies Workshop, where you both come from in Seattle. It's a co-working space. And before the show started, I referred to it as an incubator, and you said that wasn't quite right. Explain exactly what Indies Workshop is.
I'll go ahead. So it's a space where other game developers can get together and make games. And so some people are in teams, like Patrick's in a team of 4, whereas I'm mostly just there by myself. The rest of my team's all around the world. I think you had some good points about the differences between incubators, and so...
Yeah, so as a co-working space, it's more about like people sharing resources and paying for desk space. An incubator is actually an organization that puts money into a business or puts services towards a business to help them grow. And in exchange, they expect a rev share or partial ownership of the business. And that's a huge differentiator for us.
So you guys, you own the products you're working on?
Yeah.
Rather than it would be Indies Workshop who owned them if it were an incubator.
Right.
Okay. Let's hear about the projects you're working on. Patrick, you just released a game, Gurgamoth.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Gurgamoth is a flying fighting game where the level is your weapon. It's basically like Quidditch for cultists. Your goal is to knock your opponents into hazards in the levels, and each level introduces a different set of hazards. So it's one of those local competitive games. We just launched on Steam on February 16th, and it's been good. The reception's been really good so far.
That's great to hear. All right, so you made this at Indies Workshop?
Yeah. We built the game in about 3 months, and the entirety of that was at Indies Workshop.
Wow. So how many of you made that game? How many people worked on that game?
There were 4 of us.
4 people in 3 months.
Yeah, it was
made a full game.
It was a very intense 3 months, but we wanted to get something out there. We wanted to figure out like what's our next step as a company, and like can we reach the audience we want to reach.
Right. What's your role then of those 4 people? Which one are you?
I mean, since it's a small team, all of us handle multiple things. So I handle the business side, accounting, everything that's not fun about running a game studio. And I also handle some of the design, like a lot of the higher level thinking of why you're doing what you're doing in the game, as well as some of the development, like the gameplay programming, the UI programming, that kind of stuff.
So some of the big picture stuff, which I imagine is also collaborative.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, when we started Galvanic, we started as a partnership. I didn't want to be the boss. I wanted to be like the first among equals, that kind of like sort of collaborative environment.
And then so you find that working in a group like that, like somewhere in Indies Workshop, you get better ideas coming out of a group like that?
Yeah, one of the things I loved about working at a creative agency, which is what we did before we started our own company, was the fact that we'd get together and we would be in the same space collaborating. And that was important to me, and that's the reason, since we started Galvanic, we've been in one co-working space or another.
Cool. So small team making things together.
Right.
You find that leads to a more cohesive game?
Oh, 100%, yeah. And it's the reason we're able to make games fast.
Mm. So you couldn't do the 3-month timeline if you had to go to 6 different people for this thing and 9 people for that thing.
Right. Working remote would have slowed us down in different ways.
Cool. But on the other side, Jenn, you said you're working with a team of people all over the world.
Mm-hmm. How
How does that work, and how do you find a group of people internationally to make a game together?
Before I joined, I'm working on a game called Thimbleweed Park, which is a classic adventure game. And so I've joined the team. So the team sort of existed a bit before I jumped on board. And so some of that was the main people who are running it are Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick, who made some of the original LucasArts games back in the day. And so some of the people who are working on the project are people who are just, who they knew already. And then other times we're looking for the right person to fit the team. And because already these people are in different parts of, the country, it didn't really matter whether we got somebody who was in the same place as us. So we just found people who worked well for us.
How did they find you? How did you join up with this team?
I guess I know Ron Gilbert. I've known him for about 4 years now. So I guess through him, and I was finishing up a project, and he needed some more coding, and I'm like, well, I can do that. So I jumped on board.
So you do coding. Is there anything else you do for the game?
Yeah, definitely. So I help out with some of the design as well, coming up with some of the puzzles that are going to be in the areas I'm working on.
Cool.
I get to do some writing, like all the things that you look at in the adventure game. I get to write some of those things. I'm also helping with coming up with some of our merchandise that we're going to be giving out at PAX East. And I guess just help. I do customer support as well. So it's basically just helping out wherever's needed.
A lot of things, sort of a catch-all.
Yeah.
How does Indies Workshop help you with this team that's all over the place?
So I guess like I'm quite an extroverted person, and so the other option would be to be at home working on this, and I would go crazy. Like I like my animals, but I need humans in my life, and so I find being at Indies Workshop really good just to talk to humans, to bounce ideas back and forth and stuff. I have tried co-working spaces which aren't games focused, and I don't find I have very much to say to the other people. Mm-hmm. So having a games focused group is really good for me. It makes me feel like I'm part of the community of Indies Workshop, and then I'm part of like my team community, and that just helps me a lot.
So you're not strictly collaborating with these people, but you're still all sort of helping each other make your games better.
Yeah. I mean, we have Feedback Thursday. It's a really great name. Where people can like show a game that they're working on or a problem that they're having or something, and we talk about what we want for it. So sometimes it's like a tiny little, like, I don't know about the UI for this, and other times it's, what do you think of the overall feel of this game?
Cool. So just a lot of unified. We're all trying to do this thing together. We're all trying to make a great game. Have you guys worked at other big game companies? And you said you've worked on some. What's the fun? How different is it going from a big company to this small sort of indie space?
So I haven't worked at a AAA. I did work at a creative agency prior to this, and it was a good place for us to build processes. So actually, the 4 founding members of Galvanic all came from the same company, and we were used to building stuff together, so it was an easy transition in that regard.
The company just kicking itself now. Like, I can't believe we lost those guys, man.
It doesn't exist anymore.
so yes, they are.
They downsized a lot, and actually that was the reason we started. Was one of the team members was laid off, and another was leaving because he was just tired of some of the bad sides of working at a creative agency. So that was when I decided, like, I've been waiting to do this for a long time. Like, this is the perfect opportunity to grab everyone and like do something together.
So you were in that position where you were like, I'm at this sort of crossroads and I have to take this risk.
Right.
How long between forming the company between then finding Indies Workshop passes, and sort of where do you make that work?
So when we left, we actually left at the same time that another co-working space for indie devs was opening up, and that was the Game Developers Collective, and it was located in Surf Incubator. And so for the first 6 months we were there, and that ended up sort of folding because the person who started it just didn't realize how difficult running a co-working space was going to be, and generating excitement and dealing with just going out and finding people to be in your space. And so after that folded, we jumped onto the Indies Workshop on November 1st, the first day that it was open.
Cool. So you're a launch title for the Indies Workshop, if you will. How about you, Jen? How do you find your way to Indies Workshop, and where have you worked before then?
So I guess like I have worked in larger studios, and I really enjoy that atmosphere and just the people to talk with. When I decided to go indie, I did start in my house and went crazy pretty quickly because I didn't feel like I ever started work, and I never stopped working. I was always stressing about it. So when I sort of started going indie, I was in San Francisco, and I found just a general co-working space, but I didn't know, like, there was lawyers and other like completely non-game related people. I had nothing in common with them. And then a games co-working space opened up in San Francisco called Game Nest, and I joined that. And that was that was really fantastic. And so I saw how great a co-working space could be. And so then when I moved up here to Seattle, I was just like, where's the games co-working space? Where is it? And as soon as I heard about like Indie's Workshop, I'm like, right, I'm there. This is going to be great. And it is.
So you just found your tribe with Indie's Workshop, and you've been there ever since?
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool.
Yeah.
You said that though you did like working some of the bigger companies. What working in at Indie's Workshop? What are the things you missed? You think from like the having all that AAA behind you?
I guess just like the people. There's some really good people when you work in a large company. Like you're going to find some really great friends. This smaller, it is just harder to stay in touch with people, with what's going on, I guess. And I like being part of some big project that people have heard of. It's nice to say, I worked on LA Noire, and people go, oh, I've heard of that. Right. Compared to the last game I worked on was called A Glimpse Friends. It was a mobile photo challenge game. And it was really fun, and I loved doing it, but nobody's ever heard of it, so...
But as far as the work goes, though, you're finding across the board it's mostly better to do it on your own in this smaller scale and autonomy.
I like experimentation and different sorts. Like I don't feel like I like a lot of the traditional sort of games. So yeah.
Cool. All right, let's get into your personal stories. I want to hear how either of you guys fell in love with gaming, because everybody has a moment where they didn't know video games existed, and then that was their life from that moment on. So I'm going to start with you, Patrick. Where'd you fall in love with video games?
I think I played a lot of Sega Genesis when I was growing up, so much so that I burned out a TV. But then after that point, my parents bought like a Macintosh Performa, and it came with a bunch of games bundled with it, including Lode Runner 2. And Lode Runner 2 had a level editor. So like that was my first foray into game development, was I could build an entire world and like just go to graph paper and design how all the levels interconnected, because you could wire levels together. And so I built this vast world out where every level was interconnected and there were doorways that could get you around the entire world.
So you discovered gaming and making games almost at the same time.
Yeah. And my first real game was Warcraft 2. And that had a level editor as well, and it was this chance to kind of build out your own experiences. And I would play on like LAN games and sort of like direct connection games over like 56K with one of my uncles, and the two of us would just play so many different custom maps for Warcraft 2. So that was this chance to get into like not only playing games, but realizing you can customize the games to be even more fun.
And then that, of course, makes each game bigger, especially if you're willing to take the time to make a game, which I think that's the difference between people like you and a lot of us who, like, I've dabbled around with level designers before, but there are a lot of times I'm like, oh, man, I just wish somebody professional would make one for me so I could play it. So you sort of become a developer and a gamer all at the same time. How old are you when this happens?
That was probably third, fourth grade. So
there was just no hope for you. This was just the path that was set.
And I grew up with that dream of working at Blizzard Entertainment. That was my goal for a decade, until I realized wait, I could just do this on my own. I could run my own studio.
Do you still have that little dream? Like if Blizzard ever called, you'd be like, all right, I have to do it.
I probably wouldn't work for a AAA.
No, now you just love this so much.
Yeah, there's something really wonderful about building the products you design and having complete ownership. I mean, there's something really scary about it too, because you can completely fail. You can completely not find your audience and not have $1 million marketing budget to go out and find them.
That always helps.
Yeah. No, I would. My goal is to stay indie for as long as I can.
Cool. Very cool. Jen, how about you? What's your first game? How do you fall in love with video games?
So I guess I had an older brother and sister, so I probably grew up we were playing adventure games together. So a lot of old Sierra, Lucasfilm, LucasArts kind of games. So like Space Quest, Leisure Suit Larry was a big favorite. Monkey Island, of course. And I didn't really give it that much thought. That was just some fun stuff that I did with my brother and sister. And certainly no one at school was very geeky, so I didn't talk about that stuff.
You didn't consider yourself a gamer. There were just these games.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, No, well, yeah, I don't. No, I don't think the term gamer really existed then, and so I probably wouldn't have said that. And I remember in like year 10 using HyperCard to make some sort of Aladdin game, like based on the movie that had just come out, and I went way over and beyond what the teacher had possibly expected us to do. But that was just a fun project. That wasn't like something you could do as a career. I was like at a snobby all girls school, and so like the sort of careers that they told us about were mostly being a lawyer or a doctor. And so I knew didn't want to do either of those things. So yeah, I guess I ended up going to uni and doing engineering, and I forgot about games for a long time.
You're doing software engineering?
Mechanical engineering. I also did computer science as well. So like I did a double major. I think I did applied maths in there as well.
You don't know how many things you've studied?
Yeah,
she just knows everything. She just got it all.
Oh gosh,
out
no,
there.
I do. I know nothing. I know nothing. Yeah, so I guess I studied a lot, and then like when I was leaving uni, I kind of thought about getting a job in games, but I didn't really know what it was, or like I didn't really put enough effort into it, and I ended up getting a job that I liked, that was partly for the Australian Defence Force, and that was fun and all, but wasn't quite for me. Went back to uni for a while to do a master's in artificial intelligence, and that was a sort of game related. I kind of knew I wanted to do.
Told you she knows everything.
I don't. Yeah, sort of game related, but I still at that point didn't think it was a career, and I thought I was going to be a coder. But
Okay, I have to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
You said mechanical engineering and computer science and AI now. Could you build a robot?
no,
Because
definitely
you sound like
not.
the kind of person who's going to build a robot.
No, definitely not. Like the AI I built was so dumb. Like it was just useless. I was trying to make the AI have different personalities, which is probably not a good thing for a robot.
It's ambitious, though.
Yeah, a little too ambitious, maybe.
So then, when do you decide, or when do you realize gaming can be a job? How do you enter the industry?
I guess like I met somebody who was a programmer, and he was also looking for a job in games, and so I thought, oh, okay, so you can do this. And I started almost trying to apply for programming jobs, and this guy was like an amazing coder who was also like very antisocial and had all kinds of other issues, and I like realized I was competing with him for jobs, and there weren't, like, I was in Australia at the time, weren't very many jobs available. And yeah, I guess I realized that I was actually a game designer more so than a programmer, because then I could combine all these like creative parts of me that I'd been like suppressing, because I was like, creative stuff doesn't give you money and isn't a stable career, blah blah blah. And so when I could finally realize I can do like all the computery stuff and creative stuff together, that was when I went, this is me.
So you meet this guy, and you both realize you want to work in gaming. Do you work on something together? How do you start actually working in gaming?
Well, so for me, I guess like that guy went off and got a job, and he was an idiot, and I don't speak to him anymore. But yeah, so for me, I knew I wanted to make games, so I just started making games. I started on a project where I came up with a different game idea every week for the year and put it on my website. And I applied to every job that existed in Australia, which was not very many, but I applied. And then I got to work on LA Noire, which was amazing. And from then I just kept pushing it and loving it.
So you just started making games and just didn't stop.
Pretty much, yes.
And sometimes sheer force of will work.
Yes, it does.
But Patrick, how do you then? So we sort of know from your story that you were destined to be a game dev. But when does that destiny come to fruition? When do you begin from wanting to make games to being able to say, I make games now?
It's not easy. So I'm almost 30. Actually, next week I turn 30. And
Happy birthday!
Oh, thank
a little
you.
Prematurely.
But let's see, because like I studied architecture, then I studied business, then I studied creative writing, and then I studied 3D animation. So I was a much more artistic approach, and I didn't.
So he also knows everything.
I didn't start coding until after a couple of years of being in the field. So like when I moved to Seattle, I was a 3D artist, and in the side I was making 3D art for like games. But I was having a really hard time finding programmers who wanted to build those games with me, because they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I can dedicate like a couple hours a week to it," which is not like enough to get anywhere on a game.
Right.
So once I got laid off from a job as a 3D artist at an ad agency, I was like, all the 3D artists just got laid off. All the programmers still have jobs. Like there's something there, and so like it was kind of a multiple part process for me. In terms of like, I was like, I need a program to make games. I need a program to know how to program to like have like more job stability. And so it took me about 3 years to like get to the point where I was proficient enough at programming to have a job as a software developer. And in that whole time that I was learning coding, I was working in tech support and like like building my own tools to support that job. And I was also building games in my spare time. So like it was a lot of little like terrible games to get to the point where I was like, okay, now I can actually build games for money. And so then I got a job as a software developer at a creative agency, and most of the stuff I did there was games related. So it was games for clients, a lot of advergaming, a lot of games contracting.
Cool.
And it was not games that I was particularly passionate about, but it was important to me because I was learning every step towards making a game. And I was also making money doing it, which is really nice.
Yeah, making one of those little tiny games to just figure out how to make an element of a game you're going to make later.
Right.
There definitely seems to be a trend with developers that we've talked to on the show that you all make games on your own long before anybody pays you to do so.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That they have to have that desire to create.
I think that was certainly something like, because I was a very studious student. Basically, like I loved school, I loved university, I loved studying. And then it was quite a shock to me when I got to the end of university. And at the time I was like, oh, maybe I should try to get into games. And I hadn't made a single game at that point, really, other than a little Aladdin game that I had no idea how to actually play anymore. And so for me, it was a big shock that, oh, all of that work, it doesn't matter. You have to have been making games. And that's certainly really true in the games industry. They don't care if I've got a master's in AI. Like, most people don't know that at all. It doesn't matter. What they do know is
Unless you're trying to build robots.
Well, unless you're trying to build robots, yes. In which case, maybe it might be helpful. But, I mean, for the most part, you've just got to, you prove it by doing it.
Right. I think of all the industries I've been in, like games is very egalitarian, and no one cares who's making the games as much as they want to have a good product. They want to play something fun. And in a lot of situations, people don't even know who made the games that they love. I think it's kind of niche. It's a certain culture that actually cares about who indie devs are and why they make games.
It's part of why we have shows like Easter eggs to get you guys on here. And look, people make games. They're real. So both of you have made games on your own. I want to get sort of into the process of making a game. So why don't we start with you, Patrick? How does it begin? Do you start with an idea for a story, for a game mechanic, for like where do you begin making a game? What's on the blank piece of paper?
So with Gergamoth, since that was like so compressed, I have a much better understanding of the whole process. That started with an idea based on a bug we had seen in someone else's game. We saw this game where someone would make like a Super Smash Brothers clone where you could like pick up the level and throw it at your opponents and knock them off. But there was a bug in it where you could dash infinitely. So it became this game of like flying and sumo wrestling, like you're dashing and trying to knock your opponent out of the arena. And when we watched people play it and discover that bug, we saw everyone light up. Like it was a fun game to begin with, but everyone really lit up about that. And so we had this question of, can you build an entire experience around just that mechanic? And where could you take it from there? So we did the 48-hour game jam PlayFab hosted in downtown Seattle in October. And from there, like we had a prototype that we were like, actually, this is really fun. We think we could finish this in a relatively short period of time. So
Gergamoth came mechanic first. Then what do you build around the mechanic? How do you decide what to build around the mechanic?
I think it's a lot of like brainstorming and discussion around like what are interesting paths you can take this mechanic down. Where are the obvious paths? Where are the not so obvious paths? And what would people have fun doing with it? And from there, like we really started sketching out one idea after another, and we also started prototyping like single player experience. And in doing that, we discovered a lot of new mechanics that were like, hey, we could fold this back into the multiplayer experience.
So there's a point at which the game almost starts to drive itself, or as you discover new things, this has to be here now, and now you have a new product to worry about.
Right, and for Gergamoth, we focused on a very iterative approach, and that's where you let the act of creation and discovery drive the decisions you make. And it's not always the best method of developing a game, but it worked in this situation.
How about you, Jen? How about you? Thimbleweed Park was already underway when you joined the project, but when you make games, how do you start out? Do you start writing a story? Do you come up with a world?
It depends on the game. So I think I mentioned that I did a project where I came up with 52 ideas in the year. I tried to use different ways of coming up with the ideas. I think I read in a book once there's like 4 different bases for making a game, like either based on the mechanic, based on the story, based on like the art and theme, maybe was the 4th one. And so I tried, all different things in terms of starting a game, but I'm quite a gameplay mechanics driven person, and that's where I like to come at games from. So I did another project where I came up with 12 different games in the course of the year and implemented them all, and they were all just like single mechanics. So when I was like, what's the one mechanic that gets across what I want, and trying to do that. So I will often, like exactly like Patrick was saying, start from a mechanic, build on that, see what we can do that's fun with that.
So do you find, does that translate to your taste in gaming when you're looking for games you want to play? Are you more into having a neat mechanic or having a well-written story, or do you need it all?
I always go for story games usually. Well, actually, I do puzzle games on my phone, but otherwise, like if I'm going to sit down and play a game, I really like story, which I don't think I'm very good at creating myself. So
I tend to prefer more systemic games like Don't Starve. I recently started playing Crashlands. Games where there's a lot of discovery and the mechanics unfold in an interesting way. And I think that's probably why Don't Starve is my favorite game, is that the deeper you get into the game, the broader the systems become and the more interesting the interplay is between them.
So you're almost the opposite. Where like, just give me a world and stuff I can do with it, and I will create my story. In here. Have you? So Gurgamoth, you said came mechanic first. Are there other games you've made that came from story first or world first, or is it because that's your sort of thing, you come with the system first?
So the Rust Belt was also that kind of situation, and I think what it's based on, Space Junk, another game I worked on, both of those were very mechanics driven, and we're trying to experiment with not just diving into the mechanic, but thinking of the system holistically, like coming with a higher level design and purpose for the player, and then letting that drive the game. It's a little bit harder because like just grabbing a mechanic and starting there is really easy, comparably, because it's just like, hey, this would be really cool if you could grab anything in the world and swing it around as your weapon. But it's a lot harder to say like what's motivating the player in the game, and why would a player come back to our game, and what are they doing that's fun
besides just interacting with that mechanic?
Right.
So we're about halfway through. I want to take a moment to remind our viewers that you can go ahead and ask questions of these lovely developers that we have on here in the chat. If you want to put like a Q before it, you don't have to. I'll read questions, but a Q or a question mark are very helpful for us picking out the questions. Punctuation is important. But Jen, now I want to talk about something that we teased at the beginning. You said you've been working on edible games. Tell us what that means and how that works.
So I like baking. I've liked that for a long time, and I guess like I've liked doing little experimental games. So I started at the start of the year with an idea. I wanted to try to make a game where one of the core mechanics was eating, and so now that's turned into a larger project where I'm trying to come up with a number of different little games. So basically, they're tabletop games where you need to eat pieces or something, and that's part of the game. So I'm trying to come up with some games where like maybe it'll take like a day of baking and be really involved for anybody to actually make it, versus go to the supermarket and buy ingredients and you can play this fun little game.
So would they be kind of like the cheap ass games method, where you'd have like a small thing and some instructions, but you'd be sort of providing your own pieces for these games?
If you want to make it yourself, you're going to have to bake, because I don't have a license to give random people food. So
What are the pieces made out of? What do you?
Well, it depends. It depends on the game. So I've done a few games so far. One of which was where you're with a group of mates making cookies together, and you kind of compete for the different ingredients. So if you want the chocolate chips, you've got to compete for them. And then I've done 2 earlier this year. One was like this complex gingerbread game that had
Yeah, that one was delicious. That's actually one of the perks of working in the Indies workshop is that we get a lot of baked goods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love baking. That's one of the reasons I like large studios. There's more people to eat my baked goods. But yeah, so anyway, there's a gingerbread game, and you're pulling off like the pieces, and it's sort of like Minesweeper underneath. But to earn the right to pull off a piece, you had to like ask questions and learn more about the other people who were playing. And then more recently, I did a game which was The Order of the Oven Mitt, where I did that for the Global Game Jam. Everyone else at the Global Game Jam was sitting down on computers doing all this hardcore stuff, and I'm like, anyone want to eat some cupcakes while I prototype, please? But yeah, the final game that I came up with, you're like moving your piece like a chess piece, and when you capture a piece, you have to eat it in this ritual, and if you are able to actually eat all the pieces, which is quite a lot of food to eat, so many people can't quite do that.
It was a lot of food. It was, that day I had way more sweets than I'm used to having.
Yeah. So yeah, but if you are able to eat them, then you become a knight of the oven mitt. So.
So I like the idea of a game where I win because I can eat a lot of cupcakes. This is the game I've been waiting for my entire life.
I'm really waiting for you to build a pizza-based game.
Oh, pizza.
So,
Okay.
like fresh out of the oven.
Challenge accepted. There's no oven at Indies Workshop yet, though. is
Not
there?
yet. We could use that little panini press, probably.
All right.
Start out with
an
like a
extra
panini-based prototype, and then just fold it open. Then you got a pizza, basically. It's
like a calzone.
mechanics, mechanics can translate
Oh yeah.
well enough.
It's like a board game, you know. You open it up, right?
Yeah, if you ever need anybody to help test your pizza game, I'm
Okay.
available. My schedule's pretty open. Let's get back to your process though as you make games. So we mentioned both of you like to start mechanic first, but of course you can't just rely on the mechanic. And you mentioned that it can often be difficult to think about. Why is somebody coming back to our game? What's their motivation? Why are they swinging around and dashing around? How do you come up with that? What's that process like for you? Is it more collaborative? Is it you and a piece of paper for 2 hours in a room? What's it like?
Definitely for us, it's a lot of play testing. Like getting a game in front of someone and just watching them play. You don't even need to ask them a question. You just need to watch them because oftentimes, how soon they put the controller down, how often they do things like correctly, how often they struggle with things, and what those things are really shows what your game is missing. And so for Gergamoth, it was extremely driven by weekly and bi-weekly play tests where we would put it in front of strangers and just see how they played. And being able to recognize this is the pain point in the game, like we have to address this as we move forward, was really valuable.
How about you, Jen? What's your process like as far as once you've got the mechanic down, how do you add more to it?
I should be playtesting more. And that's kind of what I do with my edible games. And actually, we've been doing that a lot with Thimbleweed Park. So just the other week, we were at GDC and we had press play the game. We've also had some friends play the game, and just watching them play. Like, for me, I like helping people a lot. So if I see people doing a mistake, I want to be like, oh, no, do this instead. But that's terrible. So I'm getting better at like just sitting back and watching and like asking people to sort of explain what they're thinking about. But yeah, I guess I think about, when I'm coming up with games, I think about the mechanic. I also have this pet thing where I like to create games that are about friendship, curiosity, and challenge. And so I think about those three themes and go, well, how does this game contribute to that? And once I've kind of got a theme for the particular game, I just try to always bring it back. Like the Knights of the Oven Mitt, it's supposed to be some stupid sacred order or something. So what are we doing? Why is that happening? And
So because of that, do you find yourself primarily or exclusively working on multiplayer games?
No, well, I mean, Thimbleweed Park isn't multiplayer. No, I mean, to me, the friendship is partly just I don't really like violent games. So as long as you're not going around killing people or you're like learning about other humans, that to me kind of ticks those boxes. But I guess the little games I work on definitely like end up having multiplayer.
Do you think the edible games have room to transition into drinking games, making cocktails and whatnot?
Well, there are a lot of drinking games already, and I have considered that, but we'll see. Probably, maybe.
Right. I mean,
The year's not over
if
yet.
not you, somebody will take care of it.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well, I mean,
most games have been turned into drinking games.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I guess a lot of drinking games aren't particularly gamey, and so the games that I'm coming up with, I'm making sure they're actual games, that they're not just take some existing board game, add edible pieces to it. They're unique and different, and the eating of the pieces changes the game significantly.
Not one of those games where you're just like rolling a die and watching the game play itself.
Or I mean, I guess I've seen people make like the Settlers of Catan, but a cake of that. And so that's, I mean, eating isn't really a core mechanic. That's probably something you do after you've played, although that could be gross. I don't think.
That might be what you just mentioned. That might be there's room for that. You're right. Very few drinking games are gamey, right? Just like very few, like their edible games aren't necessarily, it's a game you can eat rather than a game that you eat while playing, or that's part of it. So that's cool. You don't see a lot of really unique games in the tabletop world because there's so many and they've all been made that there's usually just combinations of something else. So that's a really new mechanic, actually eating and fighting getting full.
That's a good question towards the top.
Yeah, we got a great question here. What do you guys do when you get stuck? Do you have a process for recharging your motivation? Everybody who's working on anything
that's why Indies
creative-
Workshop is great.
Right.
Yeah.
Indies Workshop's fantastic because everybody gets stuck and you go around and talk to people or ask for help.
It's much easier doing it full time. When I was doing like space junk on the side at my old job, like I'd often run into problems where, like, because I was only working on it for 5 hours to 10 hours a week, like I would lose track of where I was. I would lose track of where my thinking was, and being able to focus full time, being full indie is a good chance not to struggle with that. It's kind of a cheating answer, but that's what we found is we don't have as much issue with that.
My other answer would be if I'm feeling like I'm stuck on games, I'll go off and do something completely non-game related. Like I'll get outdoors, I'll do my hobbies, I'll bake, I'll do whatever I need to do to get away from the project for a moment and then come back to it more invigorated. Also, showing it to other people really helps. People are generally just really helpful. So if I think my game's crap, I'll show it to someone else. They're like, wow, it's amazing. And you're like, oh, I respect this person's opinion. maybe I'm doing the right thing.
Now I want to finish this.
Yeah.
Right. Patrick, because you did kind of give a cheating answer before you found your team when you were making, because you were making games on your own, apparently, since you were in the womb. What were there any sort of writer's block remedies that you employed?
Yeah, I think it's really important. So Richard Feynman has a book where he talks about like his experience in physics, and one of the things that was really important for him when he would run into creative blocks was he would play. So he'd play with physics, and that would unblock him. And it's really important, I think, when you're in any kind of creative enterprise to remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And that involves, in games, going out and playing games and seeing what's out there, what's motivating, what's inspiring, and taking that back and using that as a chance to recharge.
Yeah. So almost the opposite again of Jenn's, where you're like, I need to get away from games, I need to clear my head, and you're just like, I need to remind yourself why I love games and why games are awesome.
Right.
Cool. Thank you. That's a great question. Love it when the chat gets involved. You guys ask good questions out there. I want to ask about writing, because you guys have worked on your own games. How do you come up with a plot for a game when games have to be so interactive? You can't just tell a story. How do you handle the mechanic versus trying to tell a story?
Right. I think for us, one of our focal points is letting players drive their stories. That's the kind of game we strive to make. And one of the biggest issues we had in developing Gergamoth was every game in the early builds, every game felt identical, and we were asking, like, how do we add mechanics that let players tell a story? Like, what is a person's story after they end a match? Do they say things like, oh, I got that perfect freeze bomb off and I was able to just like take advantage of it and knock him into the spikes right before he unfroze, like that kind of stuff. So we don't focus as much on like a driven plot as much as we do on creating mechanics that let players create a story of their own.
So what kind of mechanics? You mentioned, I guess, timing was part of it, right? Getting the thing out for a time. What other mechanics do you put in there to make it feel more like you're telling your own story rather than you're hitting the button at the right time?
Anything epic, like anything that doesn't happen very often, or adding elements that interact. That's the most important thing, and I think that's why Dwarf Fortress is probably the best game that does this. Is that anything in that game can interact. So the more pieces you have that can interact, the more interesting combinations can occur, and the more chance there is for a player to say, "Oh, that was exciting! Like I've never seen anything like that before."
How about you? When you're writing, where do you approach putting a story into the interactive?
So on the project where I did 12, implemented 12 games in the month, there was quite a few story-based games there, and often I was trying to come up with. I wanted a story based on a particular ending or feeling that I wanted to get across. Like I knew I wrote one game which I wanted the ending to be.
Spoilers.
Yeah, it is a bit of a spoiler, whatever. I mean, the game itself didn't particularly work very well, so I don't think anyone's going to find what I call the happy ending. And the happy ending was like this woman was in a relationship with someone, and to me, the happy ending was she broke up with this person because they weren't her Mr. Right. They were just not. He was okay, but he wasn't the right person for her. And so I guess I start with sort of a feel of like the overall. I knew that I wanted to get somebody from being in a relationship to out of a relationship, and then the next thing I would generally do is I like to do little character profiles. So I go, who is this person? What motivates them? And then that helps me build like the beats of the story itself.
How do you find yourself? I've played games where that the end reveals very clearly what the whole story is building up to, and so like the most recent Batman game, I thought I knew how it was going to end within the first act of the game. How do you find yourself if you start with the end, avoiding sort of building up too much to the end and making sure that the beginning and middle of the game still have enough content?
Well, in that particular game, I probably failed because there was like 16 endings, and I had a couple of friends play through. Like it was a shortish game, but the mechanic that I had on it, which was the core mechanic, was you would read one line of text at a time, and you had to decide whether that was an important clue or not. And based on what you remembered or didn't, it changed what ending you got. But people couldn't tell where they were making choices. So a couple of people played it, not particularly many. And the feedback I got was, I mean, they had no idea whether they'd got a happy ending, a bad ending, an in-between ending. So perhaps...
But that could be one of the ways, though, that you keep, in that sense, rather than keeping the middle interesting, you keep the ending from being the ending. Any game, if you have 16 possible endings, I'm going to finish that game and be like, all right, I'm 1/16 of the way through this game now. That's to me, that's you're not done. That's part of it, is that if you have multiple endings, your ending can't fall flat because it's not over yet.
Yeah.
So you keep doing that. Any questions? I want. How about you for writing for ending or beginning? How do you sort of like avoid that, or do you, because you don't have that many storytelling elements, do you not have to encounter that as much?
Definitely, that's more of a problem for a narrative-based game. Although, like, I have been like, there's a couple narrative-based games that I've always wanted to make, and so like, someday I will address those problems. I haven't yet though.
What do you want to make? Are there any things that like you're excited to work on that you haven't done?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this game where you're a bartender, and at the very beginning of the game, you're given a vial of poison, and you have to poison one of your what is it called, patrons. And in talking with your patrons, you are discovering who is the person that you are like have been tasked to assassinate.
Like the opposite of a murder mystery.
Yeah, exactly.
Who you're supposed to murder instead of who done it. That's cool. How about you, Jen? Is there anything that you're excited to work on that you haven't worked on yet?
No, I think like I grew up playing adventure games. I'm now making an adventure game. I don't really need to go anywhere else.
You're just living the dream.
Yeah, I'm living the dream. I'm done. That's it.
Cool. We only have a couple more minutes left. I want to ask, so obviously making things on your own, as two independent game developers, there's a lot of indie game devs out there just in their bedroom waiting for the next step. Are there any words of wisdom you want to pass on to any that might be watching?
It's hard.
Certain some are.
Don't do it. Go get a real job. Sorry, no.
It's hard, and we knew it was going to be hard before we started, but like the differences between like standing at the edge of the ocean, looking at it, and being like, that's going to be cold and dark if I try to swim across it, and then being out in the middle of the ocean, being like, oh, this is cold and dark, and I don't see land anymore. Like it is challenging, and in ways that you don't expect. But if you can't imagine doing anything except for game development, keep at it until you succeed. And if you can imagine doing something else other than game development, go do that instead.
100%.
So it really, in your mind, it requires, you need the passion. You need to love what you do enough to really be able to do it.
If you are talented enough to make a good game, you're probably talented enough to do anything else that would probably pay you more. So it has to be drive. Like, you have to be driven by the unrelenting desire to create. And if you're not, then you probably should be doing something else, because it's hard.
It's hard, and you really need to care.
Yeah.
Oh, you, Jen, what would you pass on?
I would say, yeah, find out, like, kind of work out deep down why you're trying to make games. If you're trying to make games for fame and fortune, just don't. Like, you might get them, but you're going to have to go through a lot of shit before that. So work out, for me, I need a lot of external validation. So I like to make games that make me feel loved and hugged. I call it a sense of being hugged. And so I make sure that every game I work on gives me that sense of being, hugged, which keeps me motivated as I go through indie development, which is really tough.
So it helps to make the game you want to make.
No, it's no, because you could get that from any, like, if your motivation was, I want to have a family and support my children or something, then you can get a job that maybe isn't truly passionate to you, but that's paying your bills and is, sort of in games, and that's fine. So it's about, like, finding what is it that makes you really passionate, and make sure that any game you're working on is giving you that passionate thing, at least to some degree.
Cool. We've got another question from the chat here. How do you balance the concept of less is more and needing something new and interesting to draw people in, right? Which this probably will very much play into a game like Gorgamoth, where you have just this mechanic and you let stories drive themselves. How do you come up with that balance of, we need to do this but not do that?
It's hard, and we haven't hit that note yet. It's because our focus is less is more. Like, we try to keep things very stark and simple and focus on the core mechanics and fleshing that out rather than adding a lot of breadth. But there is a problem that you can run across, and we certainly have, of when you focus entirely on, like, simplicity and elegance, you can also have something that just doesn't have enough content or enough complexity. So people, like, yes, it's beautiful and simple, but people will get bored of it because it's too simple.
Right.
And that's where we're at right now, is trying to figure out how to add complexity without ruining elegance.
And what answers have you found that works for you? What have you found that doesn't work for you?
It really just takes time. It takes time, and it takes tinkering and prototyping. So 3 months was not enough time for us to get all the things we wanted into Gorgamoth.
Mm-hmm. But you still, made a game in 3 months.
Yeah.
Done nothing. How about you, Jen? How do you, when you're making a game, how do you sort of balance that, giving them more and letting them have their experience?
Some of that is, like, playtesting, watching people, seeing if they've got these, like, oh my God, kind of faces when they're doing stuff. But for me, when I'm making games, I like to try to think about what the core themes are, or the core feelings that I'm trying to get across are. Like, how do I want the player to feel in the game? And then I look at the stuff that's being added and going, is this contributing to that, or is it not? Is this helping out this main overall core of the game? And obviously, there is stuff that you need to add that, doesn't necessarily directly add, but really does. So it's just iteration, keep on going.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
You've both mentioned playtesting a lot. Working somewhere at Indie's workshop, does that bring a resource to get testers for you?
Definitely. Like, we would not have nearly the number of playtesters if we weren't in Indie's workshop, because there are monthly socials there. There are critique circles. There's a lot of events in the evenings and weekends that take place there, and that's been critical for us. Like, it's just when people come over, we can just grab our laptop off our desk and set it down in front of them and have them play the game. So, yeah, that was, like, a huge part of us making Gorgamoth so quickly.
So the co-working space, you guys mentioned playtesting so much, that feeds directly into it, that you can have that sort of reaction. You can learn about your game as you're making it, those people around you. Sounds like Indie's workshop is a great place to work.
It is.
We are just about out of time because we got to make some room for Rabbit Stew, which is up next. Don't go away. Before you guys go, why don't you just plug the projects you're working on one more time? Tell people what it is and where they can get it and when.
Oh, you can get Gorgamoth out right now on Steam. It's only $10. You just need a couple friends and a couple controllers, and you can have a good time.
Sweet.
And I'm working on Thimbleweed Park, which is a classic adventure game in a very noir setting. And it's going to be available later this year on PC, Mac, Linux, Xbox, iOS, Android, all of the things, I think. But yeah, we're going to be showing it off at PAX East if you're going to be there to come and play it.
Cool. Again, for Patrick and Morgan and Jenn Sandercock, I'm Scott Shuken. Thank you guys for watching Easter Eggs. We'll be back next Wednesday at noon as always. And of course, stick around for Rabbit Stew up next right here on Hyper RPG.